Welcome back to the What's More podcast. I'm your host, Quinton Harris. You're dialed in for episode 224. Hey, we're right on the heels of the 225 episode. We're going to talk a lot about our economic forecast. And some of the things I want to kind of point out is that this is an educational platform. By no means is this a lead generation platform. You've never heard me come on here and talk about, hey, go to this website, apply, do this, do that. I'm not trying to hide that I'm in the mortgage business. I definitely have a love for real estate and a passion for it. But I don't let that affect my decision on what I'm going to talk about. And more importantly, like the outcome and the direction in which we're doing forecasting and things to come. So talk a little bit about our methodology. What we do is we collect market data from multiple resources, such as, NAR, MLS, MBS Highway we work with, Zonda. We do Housing Wire. We've got CoreLogic, the Fred, BLS. The list is endless. We sit around and collect data points all day long. It's like one of the things that my producer and I do. And yes, this is not my day job, but the passion behind this podcast was to give clarity to the market because the news and the headlines do a really poor job of doing that. And quite frankly, it's some of the worst things I've seen out there, and the consumers are influenced by it so much that I made this podcast to help create clarity, not to drive traffic, right? So when I talk about why buying a home is a good thing, it's not because I'm asking you to use me as a lender. Like, I've never come to the show and said, hey, use me as a lender. Like, that's not what I'm doing. I always say, like, you're a lender, you're a real estate agent. I'm very purposeful in how I do that. If you ever hit me up and went to our email and said, hey, Q, I'd love to work with you, by no means am I going to turn you away. But that's not the purpose of this show. And I'm saying that because we've got a lot of comments on our YouTube channel on What's Your One More. If you'll check us out, there's a lot of people that are like, oh, yeah, this guy's one-sided. He's geared towards this because he's in the business. Well, you got one part correct. I am in the business, but I'm not coming in here with blinders on talking about, hey, this is what I want. I'm talking about what the market focus is. And so as we get into our economic forecast, I really want you guys to know that we've put a lot of effort into this. As a matter of fact, this took an entire week to put together. And a lot of the data is still compiling because December's not over with. So we're going to make a market forecast with essentially half of December remaining. But we're confident in what we're doing there and how that's going to work. And the thing about this, a lot of people turn into YouTube for like opinions, factual searches. There's a lot of opinions on there. There's not much factual stuff. This is one of them, by the way. This is a factual based podcast with my opinions inside of that. But that's my opinion. That's what I'm saying I think will happen or why this happened. It doesn't have to be your opinion, and I respect that. But again, this is not a lead generation podcast. By no means am I trying to get you to sign up for my services or, come in here and, donate money, anything like that. It's not what this is. This is an educational based podcast. And that's the premise of this. And we enjoy doing it. And I hope you guys do too. For the bulk of our audience, thanks for tuning in. And for those that are not as entrenched in the podcast and think otherwise, thanks for tuning in. And hopefully we'll see you guys in many more episodes. So let's get on with it here. So, as I talked about from an educational standpoint, one of the things that came out over the last couple days, we had CPI come out, we had PPI come out. So let's talk a little bit about that here. So the CPI is the Consumer Price Index. It's a form of inflation. It's not the Federal Reserve's favorite form of inflation. It's just a form of inflation. And then you have PPI, which is the Producer Price Index, which is also a form of inflation. But again, not the Federal Reserve's favorite form. That's the PCE. And so, but what we can take away from these two things is that it's kind of a reading of things to come. And oftentimes they trend together. They may not be the same numbers, but they're going to trend. And typically they either trend up or they trend down together. And what I'm looking for on this is that there's a portion of this Producer Price Index that kind of what we call bleeds into the PCE. So sometimes you can extrapolate from that Producer Price Index, oh, this is probably going to mean the core PCE is going to be following a similar path. And so in this particular one, the reading was pretty much flat on the core, but up a little bit on the headline. And that's because the headline includes, energy costs and food. And the food, I'm going to touch brief on this and then I'm going to get away from it. It's always something though. When you read these reports, you're like, oh, there's shelter. Oh, there's hotel stay. Oh, there's apartment. I mean, the list goes on and on. There's always one thing, right? And this one thing was the cost. I'm trying not to laugh here. In this reading, there was a 55% rise. Get this, in chicken eggs. Yeah, that's that. Yeah, it was a kind of being dubbed eggflation here, if you may. But that means that half of the monthly overall reading was impacted because of a spiked cost in eggs. I'm trying not to laugh. I'm trying not to make a joke of that. But like, really, like egg costs. I mean, anyhow. meaning that the costs were up on inflation on the producer's price index. That's the producer's price index is, hey, what did it cost to make this iPhone or this cup here that I'm drinking coffee in? There's a production cost in that, right? And that production cost has gone up. In this particular case, there's a production cost involved with, whatever the food and vegetable production cost is up 55% because of eggs. And it's kind of, I'll stop there. Anyhow, CPI flat, that's consumer price index. That's what you and I pay when we go to the store to buy something, right? That's our consumption price index, if you made the consumer price index. And so for us, that is flat, like it didn't go up, right? Now, it doesn't mean you're not seeing higher prices somewhere, but means that the actual index itself was flat and that shelter cost was in line. And what's interesting about these indexes, they're all trailing. Like you don't get an index reading in December for the month of December, right? That'd be impossible because you're in the month, right? So it's always lagging. In some cases, it's 60 days lagging. Well, in some of these costs in here, they're more than 60 days lagging, right? So we're seeing past rear view costs show up in reading today. So we won't get December's reading till January, late January. But anyhow, flat is good for now, right? Because that means inflation is not rising up. And one of the things we're going to talk about in our forecast is why we think inflation is going to continue to vacillate throughout the year. It's going to continue to go up and down, up and down. And that is because you're getting 12-month readings to create this average that are being replaced each month by the previous 12 months. So in some of those 12 months, we had like really low readings. We're going to get slightly higher ones, but that doesn't mean inflation's taking off. And that's where the headlines come in and they're going to be like, oh, inflation's rise. What is the Fed going to do to battle? Like they're expecting that too. The markets are anticipating that. That's just going to be a foolish headline that comes out that is really nothing new to the environment, but it's going to be out there. If some of the stuff we're talking about on the podcast interests you and you're like, hey, Q, I want to be a homeowner. I want to buy an investment property. I want strategies on how I can take advantage of the market. I have a solution for you. And that solution is Loan People, to where it's all about the people getting the loan and the people doing the loan. You guys know me by now. I've been doing this podcast for years, but I've been in the mortgage business for 23. And it's very rare you can find a company that has a mantra for loan officers, by loan officers. And what does that mean? That means you have a company that's designed to help provide the best atmosphere for loan officers possibly imagined. And not only that, the most efficient operations for those loan officers to be successful, which provides a better customer service. And that's what you get at Loan People. So much so that they put that in the company name. And at the heart of this is the people. It's in-house processing, it's underwriting, it's closing and funding. And why choose them? They got great rates. They close on time and they have award-winning service. So check them out at loanpeoplejax.com. That's loanpeoplejax.com. The other thing that happened last week, and I talked about this, I think 2 episodes ago, was we got the ADP report, then the BLS report came in on the Friday because I recorded that on a Thursday. When I look at the BLS report, I have just completely given up on trying to analyze this because, as you know, I refer to it as the BS report, because that's what it is. But I've given up on it. And the reason I've given up on it is because you've got the downward revisions, you've got the government jobs that show up in abundance and then they take them back. And this report is essentially, it's going to encumber a lot of holiday jobs in there, right? Because it's from November and the next one's going to do the same thing from December. So I've given up on it. But there's one thing in that report that I look at that I think is pretty important, and that's going to be the unemployment number. Because what do I talk about? It is jobs over inflation when it comes to the Federal Reserve at this point. Any way you cut it, that's what it's going to be. Our friend Logan says it's paper, rock, scissors, jobs over inflation. And the reason it is jobs over inflation, because the Fed has tackled the inflation. It's at a point that it is reasonable. They've used words like it's no longer a threat from the standpoint that it's at the 7s. There's always a threat it could rise, but it's not a threat that's on the table for them to worry too much about at this time because it seems like it's under control. All the readings have a 2 handle on them. And so that's their target range, right? So they're comfortable with that. The thing they're not comfortable with is the job market. And the reason they're not comfortable with that job market is because it can change on a dime. And I think that that's something that's definitely concerning to them, because as that changes, and I say it's a runaway train. I've talked about that over and over again, that once unemployment becomes a bad issue, it's something that you just can't pull back and say, oh, go hire a bunch of people, right? So it's jobs over inflation at this point. So we talked about one of the headline jobs is the jobless claims or readings that comes out, every Thursday as well. And we, matter of fact, had one right as we're doing this show, came out this morning, and it was higher than expected. And again, just a reminder, that is people going to the unemployment line. That's new people going to the unemployment line. And it wasn't expected to be that high. It was 242,000. The expectation was 220,000. So people go into the claims counter to file for unemployment. And then as they get that unemployment, they can keep it for a certain amount of time. Those are called continued claims, right? Continuing claims. That went up as well, which means more people are still on unemployment, which speaks to the fact that they're not getting placed into jobs right away. As continuing claims come down, that means people are finding jobs, or they're winging off of unemployment because they've ran out of time. It's one of the two. But as that number continues to rise, that is not a sign of a strong labor market. And as the jobless claims go up, I'm saying that 250 mark. Once we see jobless claims hit 250 on a weekly basis for 3 weeks in a row, I think it's going to get the Federal Reserve's attention. I think at that point they go, ugh, that's not where we want to be. Another place you don't want to be, I spoke about it a minute ago, was unemployment. It literally went up, and that's what we said was going to happen. And I think it's going to continue to happen even more. You could argue it was 4.3, right? Because the roundup factor, right? It was 4.24. That's kind of how you break it down. But it could have been 4.3 if it was, it very much should have been. And a lot of pundits are saying that. That is a number that has caught the Federal Reserve's attention because anything over 4.1, they have admittedly say they feel like that's a potential danger zone for the economy. And the fact that it's at 4.2, again, I'm going to argue it was 4.3. And if you really extrapolate some of this data that they put in there, you could argue that could have been 4.5. And if I can make that argument, I know they're sitting in a room doing the same thing. And it's numbers like this as to why I think the next Federal Reserve meeting is an instant quarter cut. It may be even more than that, no matter what the Federal Reserve chairmans come out and say in their commentary afterwards. I mean, we're 6 days away from the next FOMC meeting. And, if we go over to the Fed Watch, right, we talk about this all the time. It is now at a 98.1% confidence factor that they're going to cut the rates a quarter, 98.1. And it's because of a lot of the stuff I'm sharing with you right now. And that number went up dramatically when that BLS report came out. It also went up again as the jobless claims report came out today. Again, inflation's not moving this needle. It's labor over inflation. That's what's moving the needle right now. So they're already forecasting a quarter basis point cut. So what could cause it to go to a no-cut zone or maybe even an additional reduction? Well, if that PCE reading comes out and that core reading is way higher than expected, right? Not a little higher, not like in a tenth, but if it's way higher, if it's 0.3 or 0.4 higher than expected, they're going to pull that quarter off the table. But guess what? That's not going to happen. We know that's not going to happen because it's an average, right? So the volatility is not as greatly impacted. And you're just not going to see a reading like that come out because the producer price index just gave us a glimpse as well as the consumer price index. So the question becomes, what could cause it to go to a half? Well, okay, I don't think the PCE reading going down that much is going to cause an additional quarter spike. Again, it's labor over inflation. Here's what I think happens. If you continue to see job numbers deteriorate on a weekly basis and jobless claims continue to go up, that could be the insight to the Federal Reserve. Because again, this is like the fifth time I've said this: labor over inflation. So we're going to continue to watch that, and I'm sure you guys will too. But it looks like the quarter's on the table. So this would be the second cut. Since my 8-cut forecast, I would be 2 of 2 out the gate. I'm 2 of 2 already. Can I make it 8 of 8? And the reason I say can I make it 8, there's nothing I can do on this, but can my forecast be 8 of 8? Because I think as soon as that starts to happen, we'll be back in the low 6s, potentially upper 5s sooner than later. And hey, here's the mortgage guy in me coming out finally. That's a great time for people to go refinance and people to buy homes. And that brings affordability back to the market. So guilty is charged on that one. But other than that, it's all educational based and for your knowledge only here at What's Your One More. If you like what you're hearing, please share this podcast. Please 5-star review us on Apple, Spotify. As you're sitting around for the holidays talking with friends and family, share this episode. Talk about what's going on in the market. Listen to it. Carry on some conversations. The previous one we did on mortgage rates, just sitting around talking about who's got what rate at the table. Share that one on how they got that rate and how it's comprised. And if there's someone complaining about how high the rates are, share that with them so they can understand what's causing it and what will cause the effect to go down as well. Check out all of our graphs, our YouTube channel at What's Your One More. Until the next episode, hope you guys have a wonderful Merry Christmas, and we will see you at What's Your One More.